So tonight, it's a great pleasure to welcome Ivan from YesGraph to talk about growth. Ivan.
Thank you very much. It's really quite an honor to be here to talk to people that are so open to share ideas and to really communicate, because I think that's a really positive aspect of the growth community. All the engineers and analysts and designers coming together and to share information is really great. So I went to Gustav's talk 2 weeks ago about referrals at Airbnb, which is really great to see a different perspective on something I've worked so much on. And it's really, overall, I just want to thank the hosts here to have this kind of event, because it's really awesome to share that kind of information. There is a bit of a problem, of course, in that if I tell you what I've done before, if I say, hey, this tactic, this thing that's worked for me, it might not apply to you. And there's a lot of chatter in growth of saying, do what Uber did, do what Dropbox did to grow, and not enough analysis of whether that even matters for you. And so the big focus of this talk is actually going to be on a way of thinking about the world, so that when you do encounter that information, you can take it, contextualize it, and incorporate it into your own strategy and process. But if I just talked your ear off about product development process and theory like that, that'd be pretty boring. So I'm going to anchor all this in examples, so a bunch of examples, like very specific things we tried, and how that fits into this broader framework. So let's dig in about how to drive growth. So a bit of history about me personally, just because that context is going to be really important to see what products I've done before, where I've worked. So I had a YC-backed startup called Tipjoy. It was a social micropayment system, and we really struggled to get that marketplace right. Marketplaces are really hard as far as merchants and sellers and all this. So that struggle, we never really got over it. And so when I went to go work at Facebook on credits, which was, philosophically very similar to what we were doing at Tipjoy, I was enamored with the way they ran growth, because the way they're planning on growing the credits team and the way they grew the advertiser base was actually really similar to how they planned on growing the normal user base, as far as bringing engagement mechanisms and the same kind of metrics we track, which is really fascinating that the same framework for thinking about growth can be applied to such different products, like an advertising product versus a social network versus like a payment system. And so when I went to go work at Dropbox after that on growth, it was just focused entirely on that problem and applying the same methodologies and running countless tests and launching new products around that. More recently, I've been doing a startup called YesGraph. So if you're looking to hire smart people, you should try it out, yesgraph.com. And the basic idea is to help your team collaborate around finding more referrals, so it's very intelligent about your social network connections. And I'll talk a bit about some examples about how we're thinking about growing YesGraph too. So I'm going to start from a very high level, driving through the 5 basic things you need to do, in my opinion, to drive growth, and then give a bunch of examples for each one. And the very first thing is to pick a goal. And this might seem kind of weird, like, is this really so hard? And it turns out it is actually kind of hard to have a goal. And the basic motivation for this is that, you have Mixpanel, Google Analytics, maybe some monitoring on some performance stuff, and maybe some ad dashboards. You have all these different numbers. You actually have hundreds and hundreds of numbers you're looking at. And worse is that different people within the organization see different numbers. So the idea of having everyone in the company focused on driving towards a goal is really, really important. And picking that, to unify that effort is really fundamental as a first step. And then what you want to do is be able to map the product that you have, and also the way your users interface with that product, so namely your data. You want to have a good understanding of the entire interface of your product, like the surface area, and all the analytics associated with it. If you don't have that, you're basically flying blind. But more importantly, this gives you a very good sense of the kinds of levers, like this little widget over here is part of our sign-up flow or our sharing flow, which affects clicks over there, and which affects sign-ups over here, which affects actives, which is our actual goal. So understanding this mapping of what you're working on, or the different parts of your product, to your main goal is really, really important to be able to even understand the currency you have to work with. And then you want to triage the things you could get done based upon the cost and the benefit. And so this is kind of obvious when you say it, that a lot of people don't do it. What's going to happen if you were to launch this product? What is the impact going to be? And is it going to take a week, a year? Is it going to take a lot of design resources, marketing resources? So you have costs in a bunch of different ways, along with a lot of benefits potentially. And then you want to execute as much as possible in parallel as possible. So if the name of the game is incremental improvements in many different parts of the product, then you inherently have to parallelize that and drive that as hard as possible. And finally, you want to keep score. And this is actually really hard to do because of the mentality of, we just finished this, on to the next thing, but actually what you launched 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, finally the data came in for that, and that actually helps build the intuition for the cost benefit that we talked about before. So there's a whirlwind tour to talk about, setting a goal, mapping your product, and then triaging based on cost benefit, executing on what works, and then keeping score. So let's talk about some examples now. So Facebook, this guy, Chamath, he's really smart. If you see some videos from him, you should watch them. He has a great way of characterizing the way Facebook grew. He's a really interesting speaker overall. And when he talks about Facebook's growth, he says, they tested some things, they measured some things, and they deployed, right? So very simple, like 3 steps. And he even glosses over this idea of a goal. And it's because, of course he does, because Facebook, everyone in the company understands what the goal is. The goal is to get everyone on the planet to use Facebook. That is incredibly diffused throughout the organization and has been well understood since the very beginning of the product, really. And so setting a goal is really hard, but it's so awesome when you have a company where this goal is really, really obvious about what to do. And so it's a really interesting perspective that the goal being so implicit, they don't even talk about it in their advice on how to grow. Whereas at Dropbox, you can think about it sort of deeper in the funnel. It's not just like the high-level goal, but which things affect that. And so at Dropbox, they had this notion of activations. So it's like what's after sign-up that you look at for what's an active user, what it takes to activate them. And their methodology for finding this was actually really interesting. They looked at every single subscriber and what was common about them. Like 99.9% of subscribers, so not just the free sign-ups, so people that paid the money, what was really common about them? What did everybody do besides sign up? And it turned out it was installing the desktop client and syncing a file. And this is really relevant because they picked this goal before they had mobile apps. And so in that context, you have situations like people signing up from Android or iOS or the new mobile apps, and they don't have the desktop client. And it actually turns out that still really, really matters. So it's actually a really great measurement. It's a really great goal. And it stays true to today. It's slightly changing with separate mobile apps, like pure mobile experiences. But this idea really helps organize the way you think about activating your users, because you have this next step you're trying to get people to as far as they have the desktop, they have the mobile app, and what do they do next? So for YesGraph, our funnel is a little bit different. The YesGraph, the way the product works is that you get your team organized around making referrals. So a kind of obvious goal is to say, like, well, we want to maximize the users that come in, sign up, and then they get referrals. It's pretty straightforward. But it's actually just really want to highlight how subtle this is. Because if you want to maximize the rate at which users that sign up get referrals, that's really, really focused on the funnel after they sign up. It's like, what happens after that? Do they send a number of invites? Do they create a job rec and do you get people involved? And what happens with those that are invited? Do they go and connect to their social network, the way the product works, where you connect to Facebook and LinkedIn, and then we rank your contacts and you make recommendations. So that's option A, is the conversion rate. Option B, as far as picking a goal, would be to maximize just the number and say we want as many people as possible to have gotten referrals. And just to highlight, these sound almost identical, but they're actually totally different as far as where we spend our time. Because if you want to maximize the number, it's very reasonable to work on the outbound messaging as far as the sales process, or ads, or different kind of customer acquisition campaigns. That has nothing to do with the product. It's all outside the product. And you have commonalities like the messaging that would be appropriate on your homepage, or different tutorials along with your outbound messages and the key value proposition you're sending out in these outbound emails. But those two things are entirely different, and I think it's been a bit of a challenge because we're basically talking about where do you spend your time, and they're really, really different. Do you patch the holes in the leaky bucket, or do you try to get as much water in there as possible? And for such an early stage startup, we only have 6 people, we're 2 years old. It's really, really early. It's goal setting is actually really hard. It's something that we've toggled what we focus on, and it's been a bit of a challenge for us. Despite it sounding identical, maximize the number of people that get referrals, it sounds identical. So shifting gears to sort of the next step where you want to map your product and have a good understanding of your data. A really good example from Facebook again is PYNK, people you may know. What they found was that if you have, I think it's 7 friends within 10 days, you're much more likely to become an activated and retained user. And this example is given really commonly, but what's less common is sort of the ways that has influenced the product. And so, for example, when you're looking at the people you may know list to suggest friendships there, sometimes they're really stupid. They're really dumb. Who fuck is that guy? I have no idea who this person is. And the key to understand why this is so awesome is because not for you, it's for them. You're trying to get them to get 7 friends. And so they're scraping the bottom of the barrel to make sure these new users that have like 2 friends actually can get somebody on board. And everyone in this room that has 400 friends is totally irrelevant. You're totally activated and hooked in for life. You're never going away. And so it's just a really interesting example, and let alone the analysis required to know that that mattered. Like, it's really hard. Like, what factors matter to determine whether somebody's going to be retained or not. It's a huge challenge. All these analytic services say they do it, nobody does it. It's really hard. It requires a lot of modeling for specific use service. It's really hard to get right. And then you have Dropbox referrals. And so here, it's sort of, as far as the map of the data, I just want to highlight that you can go deeper and deeper and deeper in this. So, you have your top level goals of getting people to sign up and be active users, and then where do people come to sign up? You have different sharing channels. They sign up for mobile, they sign up for the desktop client. There's actually a number of different channels. One of those channels is referrals. There's actually 5 different ways you can spread referrals, and so you can have a bulk email importer. You can have just typing in email addresses there, which is actually 2 flavors. Whether you've imported your email address, there's a type ahead or not, and you really should distinguish between those when you're looking at the data. You have this global link to be able to share wherever you want, or you can post it to Facebook and link there, or to Twitter. And so just each of those different channels is all within referrals, which is all about sharing to get more signups. And so you can really, really dig deep when it comes to analyzing the data here. And it's required to know certain things, like how much does that bulk import email matter versus typing something. It affects the product decisions that you make as a result. And so, for example, with referrals, even for one of those channels, you can just go deeper. Let's say you have the tweets, and so you have the number of visitors to that referrals page over your active users. You have the rate at which those visitors tweet, and then you have the clicks on those tweets, the click rate, and you have signups from those clicks. And if you do the product of all 4 of these, you get the signups, the new users, over the existing active users, which is a viral coefficient. And so the awesome thing about this page is you have these 5 different channels here, and you can actually talk about them in a very common currency. Each channel can be measured apples to apples if you do like an even deeper layer to understand the actual results of what matters more. And this is important to understand because you have to make certain product decisions related to that. And sometimes it's not even about top-level growth. For example, the blue line here is the spread rate of bulk email importing. So for the people that decided to choose to bulk import their email, and by that I mean this option here to import your email contacts. So of the people that did that, they had a certain number of recipients that they sent it out to. And then, this might be shocking, they turned off the select all option on the bulk email importer. Which as far as growth people go, it's like, whoa, you removed the select all? Like, how could you make that decision? And it's because most of that's junk. Like, you have like thousands of emails there that really no chance of responding to. And so that red line is the acceptance rate. And so right when you remove most of the spammy emails, the acceptance rate goes dramatically up. And overall, I think that the total number of referral emails went down something like 80%. Like a huge drop in the number of referrals when we made this change. I think we also capped the number that you could select to 50, so it wasn't just removing the select all, but another restriction on top of it. And so the total number of referral emails went down 80%, and the total number of referral signups went down 3%. And that was just in the short term, right away. And that as far as long-term deliverability, is awesome. The idea of having that much less email, which means that much less being marked as spam, and your other emails then have much more likely to actually get through different filters, huge win. And so if you can lower the volume of that, the engineering is easier, you have, again, deliverability issues. And so it's a really big win, and it's only available if you actually understand things like the impact of the bulk email channel. Whereas I'm sure you've had religious conversations internal to your company that have said like, no, we can't do this. It's like, we can't remove that, it's really important, and not really backed by data. And the data is what helps you inform that product decision. So you have picking a goal and mapping your product and understanding your data. And now I guarantee you when you map everything, you're going to come up with dozens and dozens of examples of things you can do. And I don't care if you have 10 engineers, 1, or 1,000 engineers. Like, there's going to be many, many more things you can do than you have the resources to do. So you have to triage. And you have to triage based upon cost-benefit. Where, it's subtle too. So it might be that sometimes like you have only one designer and 4 user-facing projects that all require design work and 5 other things. So you need to triage not just based upon the actual cost, but also on who works on what when. And so it's a big planning process. And basically, it costs a lot more to work on things that aren't effective than are, because it's huge opportunity cost. And so I want to talk about a few easy wins at Dropbox. So we had this Getting Started tour, which is great, because you get some bonus space if you complete all of these actions. And so as far as onboarding users to the product, it helps them get really deep into it. And it's this really nice tool that you can add things to. So for example, it was 6 items, and we added a 7th item to say if you use the mobile app. It's like another one on the list you can get done. And so super simple way of getting people that don't typically have the mobile app, those coming to the web, and seeing that tour experience, getting them to go try the mobile app and incentivizing them with extra space, which by the way, gets them accustomed to the idea of getting extra space for taking an action, so it primes them on the referrals program. So super easy win, just add it to the list, and it was really impactful. Another one, this one's even more shocking. So this is the email I got from Dropbox, and there's a PS on the end that says, get extra space for free, super appealing PS. And it's just a prompt to use the referral program. And when we were testing this, I took about 10 emails and did A/B tests in parallel, added a PS to a bunch of emails. And I found that there's a 6% increase in participation in the referral program. So people that sent referrals, 6% bump, and the users that did that, if they got the PS email. So it's super easy, right? I'm just editing a CMS. It's like no engineering work required at all. Fuck yeah, like super awesome. And then we launched it on a bunch of emails, so no longer parallel testing, so everyone sees this. And it actually went up 15%. Wow, like what? Like a 15% increase in participation in that kind of program. Very top level funnel as far as number of referrals sent. Super awesome. And the interesting thing is like why, I'm speculating now, like why is it that it was disproportionately valuable when we launched it? And it could be that it takes like 2 or 3 prompts in order to see that message before you actually participate in it. So it's interesting from a sort of like a top of the funnel prompts in order to send these invites, and also from the fact that it's just so easy. And similarly on the homepage, we essentially launched a house ad, and here it is on the bottom left, and now it's for Mailbox. Previously it had been for the Teams product, the enterprise product. And I don't know how many of you are working on B2B products, but there's a really big deal around like sourcing leads and lead research and getting them qualified and doing a lot of messaging to them. And the fact that this promotional space became a dominant channel of leads for the enterprise product is astounding in that context. A house ad on your freemium product becomes the major source of leads for your enterprise product. Nobody does that. Like nobody has that offering, which is why Dropbox is totally going to win in the enterprise space. Like Box has no chance, because they have just so many hundreds of millions of users that all use Dropbox at work. They're going to convert them to get the IT departments to control that. And the fact that a house ad, which is obviously like really easy engineering work. We actually worked too hard on this. It was fast to get out, and we had like all these analytics to understand the quality estimate of it. And of course, it's such a sparse and clean homepage. It's like, of course, nobody really cares about it. And now they can use it for other things like Mailbox. I wish they used it for apps to say, here are some awesome developers that make Dropbox apps. Dropbox doesn't do a good enough job there. And that's the nice thing about the product change itself. It's just a platform to run these ads. They can use it for so many different things. So in the cost-benefit context, having like a bunch of different like uses of Mailbox, uses of Teams, uses of different apps go up as a result of that product change is huge. There are also some non-wins. Sorry, image missing for this, but we did things like, obvious things, like what if we changed the prompt on the homepage, made the button to download Dropbox garish, different color, not the Dropbox blue, a bunch of different things like that, different emails. And so just the only thing I want to say, just to make sure, is just because it's easy doesn't mean it's a win. Like, many tests fail. So I talked about the good ones, of course. But a red or green download Dropbox button doesn't matter. Like, it just didn't matter at all, which is surprising. And so there's a bunch of things we did that were like super easy to get out and also didn't matter. Like I email A/B tests like constantly. And then you have, as far as triage, the not so easy wins. And so this is the basic problem here is when you spend an incredible amount of energy on something that is uncertain to be a win. And I think this, now I'm mainly talking about Dropbox, you can't justify this, you just can't. And so they spent an incredible amount of time on this photos experience. And it's an amazing photos experience. They thought, well, what do we want? We want people to put more things in their Dropbox, and they value things that they own, and it's good for us to have like your photos and videos in there. So what if we, on a mobile app, automatically uploaded everything to your Dropbox? What if when you plug in your camera, you plug in your phone to your computer, it sucks up everything and puts it in your Dropbox? As far as doing something automatic, or close to automatic, that's really good for engagement and usage, it's a great experience. And the fact that without thinking, you've basically backed up your photos, it's really, really good for users. It's an amazing, awesome experience. And like the first time I used the feature that plugged in my phone and I sucked everything up, I actually did it for like all my old iPhones and my cameras and all that. Yeah, old iPhones, plural, sorry, I'm one of those guys. So the net result was like the first 15 minutes of using it, I uploaded like 7 gigabytes of photos, which like immediately would have burst through my quota if it wasn't 5 terabytes. So like it's an amazing, amazing feature, and it took 9 fucking months to launch. That is eons and eons, and you see this again and again with sort of their sensibilities about how long it's reasonable to work on something, what quality it needs to be to actually get out the door. And you see it with Carousel, which is a super amazing application. The fact that the files aren't local, but that it feels like it's a local experience, that's super, super hard engineering-wise. And I don't know if it matters from a product perspective. Is it really going to juice the performance? I don't know. I don't think so. They probably spent months on it. And so there are things you can spend time on that probably aren't worth it. And again, it's kind of like a religious thing. It's like people just feel this needs to be the experience, and so that's why they go and build that. And of course, they're not basing it on any kind of data. Like, of course, photos matter, but it doesn't matter to that degree, like doing it so hard. And even on Mailbox, the things they could do. So one of the awesome things about Dropbox is that it works in the background, that it's like just working back there. And one of the worst things about Dropbox, that it's in the background. There's no interface to it. So from a product perspective, especially from a growth perspective, where you want the user to do things, like you don't have an interface to deal with. And so when they bought Mailbox, I was like, awesome, great, they're gonna make a desktop app, your mail is open all the time, it's just gonna be this constant Chrome open for Dropbox, they can have so many prompts there, like that house ad that I mentioned on the homepage is gonna be even better because it's gonna be open on their desktop all the time. There's so many things you can do with it. And that's like a year past and they haven't launched the desktop clients. And I'm like, guys, come on, like Windows folks are suffering. Like you should get them this client. So I think that it's slow in the wrong way, because that would be an incredibly high leverage change if they're not bothering to do yet, because they're really, really focused on mobile, which, of course, might be right. I should also mention, as much as I can be critical or appreciative or say how awesome Dropbox is, they're really doing really, really, really well. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I could totally be wrong here. Around my balance. It's just the way I think like companies should run the process. So after you've picked a goal and you've mapped your product and you understand the relationship of different levers that you can do to execute things, and you've triaged by cost benefit, then you go and execute in parallel. And I think examples here are a bit silly because it's really about your organization within your company, and there's a number of issues around this that I want to discuss. So for example, whose responsibility is it to grow? There's a whole topic dedicated just to that. Do you have a growth team? Are they diffused throughout the company? What can you do to make more of a growth culture? A bunch of questions around that. And I think if I were to join a company that did not have a good enough growth culture, the very first thing I would do is just like take an analyst consultant approach and say, talk to everyone in the company and say, what are you working on? What do you think is going to happen when you launch that? Not aggressive, just to say, what do you think is going to happen? Okay, and when is this going to launch? Like that whole cost-benefit attitude. Because if they're saying, I'm working on this awesome photo sync feature, it's going to be amazing, probably out in a month and it takes 3, and the impact is nothing because no one discovers the feature, like that's useful. And like it really helps train the culture around it. Another issue is just your openness around data, where how easy is it to answer questions? And so Dropbox built this system called Cora, and it was like with a C, not a Q. And the idea was like make a really simple interface and just ask a question and say like the question and why you want the answer. It's super simple. It's like almost like a blog interface. Like first tutorial you do in programming could solve this problem. But organizationally, it's amazing because now people like analysts and BizOps and sales and support, anyone else can come in and say like, well, how many people, like what percentage of our actives file support tickets or whatever the question is. And then when the analyst or the engineer that's going to answer the question finally comes in, they first ask, do you still need to know this? Like, is this still relevant? Like, am I going to spend 3 days working on this script for something you don't need? So a very basic organizational structure that at the same time makes you more efficient, at the same time also gets this openness, gets these questions answered. There's other things you could do, like, it's kind of obvious by having like a daily metrics email with that top level goal and how it's changed recently. So everyone in the company knows where you stand around growth. So it's a very obvious thing that everyone in the company knows. I do want to talk about analytics here too, because it's relevant. There's almost like a neural linguistic thing. You know how like there's some cultures have like 20 different ways to say snow, or some surfers have like all these different ways to talk about the waves. It's because they're thinking about it all the time, so the language evolves and develops to have more textured understanding of it. The opposite is also true. There are certain words that don't exist in the English language or whatever language. Thinking that concept is hard. I find this fascinating. And I want to draw an analogy there to something like Mixpanel. Like, remember that thing I mentioned before that's super important for Facebook about the number of friends you have after a week of signing up, that distribution? Can't answer that on Mixpanel. Just can't. It's not a funnel. It's not a formula. It's different. It's a histogram, God forbid. And it's close to technically impossible to answer that question. And the issue is, if you're diving in from the analytics tool perspective, your language is whatever they have there, then it's totally the wrong way to go about answering questions. When it comes to answering questions, you should start from first principles and say, like, what do you want to know? And forget how hard it would be to answer that. Like, it just doesn't matter. This just means two things. One, of course, besides like answering any kind of question, you need to have control over your data. So I highly recommend segment.io, and you multiplex to your own backend, whatever that is, we have complete control over it. That's like number one. And then you also don't necessarily want to restrict the questions you ask based upon how easy they are to answer. And so for me personally at YesGraph, I do a lot of our analysis, and 50% of the time, the question can only be answered with a Python script of our own data. We're not at scale that it's that hard, which is great. And if we were, I think that ratio would stay roughly similar because you've got more tools and more abstractions. But what if I couldn't answer those questions? What if 50% of my questions couldn't even be answered because I'm so reliant on those third parties? And again, most third parties that say, like analytics tools that say they'll actually solve your problem don't, because you have unique problems and they're designed to be general. And so when it comes to how you go about solving certain problems within your organization to move fast and in parallel, I think these kinds of questions are really important, where you can answer any kind of question, get the data that you need, and organize your projects in a way that you get things done fast. So keeping score, it's a great analogy from Facebook. So Facebook, like many companies, had a lot of big products that they launched, where they would go and for months, there was a new newsfeed or a new app or something like that. And the team that would work on it, this is not unique to Facebook, but it's equally awesome, where they would go and ring a gong in front of everyone in the company. Like the product and engineering folks would come up and say, like, ring the gong because we just launched new newsfeed redesign, whatever. All this hard work. Which is super fun, great for like the culture of shipping. I think is great. Except that the great story from the growth team they had pride that they never rang the gong. Because pretty much you can guarantee that if you've rang the gong in the growth team and worked on something that was way too hard, like way too much time spent on that, and you need to have like a much more focused on like iterative improvements. So as far as almost a cultural way of infusing the idea of like the kinds of wins that you can expect, I think that's awesome. And another aspect here is, as far as keeping score, is what I was mentioning before, but it's just really hard. Like you've worked on something and you're launching it, and you're done and you want to work on something else, and you have to kind of stop and say, what about the thing we launched like 2 launches ago? How did that go? It's really hard because you're so focused on the new, because growth people are so like want to hustle and get shit done, but actually they need to inform their decisions, because I mentioned like the triage by cost benefit, but what if it's a very different product feature? What if it's something that you have no intuition over? So this issue of intuition is really important. It's something you can build over time, and the best way to do that is with experience. And basically, if you don't keep score, if you don't go back and say how the efforts you've done before mattered, then you're not building this intuition. You're not actually having that experience as well as you could. And so you definitely want to keep score. I also think there's some shortcuts though, and like people in this audience are shortcuts. It's like they've done things before, and the same thing I was mentioning at the start, like the way we share information is really valuable. So how does this ad network performing, or how did this test affect you? If you have a referral program, what's Lyft or Uber or Dropbox or Airbnb doing with theirs? Like, what can you see to even just have ideas and see the expected performance? So I definitely encourage everyone to talk and share. Like there's almost a mentality of like the best hacks or whatever are like too good, you don't want to share them, but that's obviously bullshit, don't be an asshole. Like, just share and be open, and then everyone's going to do better, because all we want to do is make our products awesome. So yeah, if you have a goal, map your product, triage by cost benefit, execute it as fast as possible, and then keep score. If you have any questions on this, besides right now, if you don't get to ask a question, you can email me at event@yesgraph.com. Happy to answer any kind of question related and stuff. And yeah, I guess we can start with questions.
So with Dropbox and those emails that you send people, there's a lot of text there. And I always see very different kinds of emails. Ones with like a big button that you want your users to click. You guys went with the text and link approach. How does that work out?
Well, I would say shorter emails are generally better. You might be surprised by how ineffective big calls to action are. I don't know if there's any kind of like banner ad aspect here. The correct answer is test it for yourself, because it's going to be different depending on your audience and what they want to do. So if you have, for example, an onboarding email that needs to explain your product, something like that, I would expect that to be a bit longer and maybe more fleshed out. Sometimes more minimal emails are relevant. We've experimented with this at YesGraph as well, as far as the invite email that you send to request referrals, and we found like the simplest email, like, hey, I need your help, here you go, like here's a link, that's all you need. Part of the problem there is that we put words in the user's mouth to like say, like as if it's coming from the user, so the more words you include, the more it like seems like a robotic, like not sent from the user. Similar thing with the Dropbox referral program as well. But it's very different depending on the channel, what you're trying to do, I would say that for sure. You know, it's kind of like there's certain buttons that matter more, like the install on iOS like button is really notable. If you're using a custom button for any kind of app store thing, you want to question that. Like people are so trained on the way that button looks. Yeah, it's kind of talked around the issue, but my second answer about test it yourself is definitely the right answer. Go ahead.
So Dropbox and Airbnb are always like classic, the case studies for every growth hacking article I think I've read. Can you cite any recent sort of more novel, or not necessarily more, but novel ideas around growth hacks that anything different, anything new that's coming out, like companies that are starting up and they're using different growth hacks, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, this is a really common question among people in this room. Like, what do I not know? Like, I want to know like every option I have, and what am I missing? Like, what do I need to get out there? I kind of need to build a model of what everyone in this room already knows, and what I know more than that. I kind of talked a lot about what I already know. So just let me think for a moment. You know, honestly, like some of the best answers are the most boring. So, like, yeah, like add a referral program. It actually works really, really well. I mean, I could talk your off about how to structure a referral program too, and a lot of people get it wrong. They do things like heavily promote posting to social networks instead of the email, which email is a dominant channel for referrals depending on the context. One thing I've started focusing a lot lately on is ranking a user's contacts based upon the affinity to help improve that kind of relationship. So if you have a referral flow to say, oh, here are the 5,000 contacts they have, and all these poor barons at the top of the list getting these invites, and if only you could say, depending on the context, it might be your family, or it might be your friends, or local people, or people in a certain city, a certain kind of relationship. So I've started thinking about how to solve that problem more generally, or actually thinking about building a service around that. So if you're interested in kind of like suggested invite this as a service, email me at event@yesgraph.com. That's one thing I'm working on that I think is really next level shit. I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, especially on retention, because that seems to be really what I guess that has a lot.
Yeah, I think there's the simple, boring stuff is actually still kind of hard to get right, and a really good example is around retention, fine point. And I mentioned this in the talk about sort of the drivers of retention, like what it takes. And the problem is, it's like you probably aren't logging everything you need to log, so just instrumentation is probably missing for figuring it out, and probably the modeling could be improved. And so figuring out how a similar service has modeled their retention as far as new signups converting to active users, or churn and resurrections, and what transition probabilities, all these cohorts. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of drivers there. There's actually really good into like any kind of suggested invite list as well, because what you're essentially trying to do is to find out what factors matter to have a certain action be taken. So it's a very similar kind of learning that you can take. It's actually a bit more exploratory with retention. That's why it's so hard, because you're not sure what to even look for. Because you can run a test to say like, well, how many friends matter when you have a social network, but to even know like what factors, like what events might be, is really, really tough. I would guess, depending on the audience, most people in this room are working on something different, which is more about not so much retention as activation. Like you can sort of consider product market fit a high activation rate. That means that like people that come in, get it, they use it, and they're happy, and that's like happy user base. And finding product market fit is really hard, and so finding, people have referred to this as that aha moment, you know, like what does it take to come in there? Really hard to get right, because maybe your product's useless, maybe it doesn't exist. Like so like answering that question is sad. And as far as like religious like inability to recognize a problem, founders deluding themselves that their app is worthwhile is like, that's really high up there. Which is kind of harsh, but like so many startups fail, it's like obvious fact. Like so this is why it's hard though, because it's really hard to know why, from like a very high level, why something's working or not. And you've seen, I think, apps that sort of stumble into this, where they obviously have something and they're like tripping over themselves scaling with how awesome it is. But most people have to like really slog through it. As far as Dropbox getting that aspect right, I think the best news ever is that just smoothing out a lot of rough edges is what makes Dropbox good. It's not some magic, it's just a lot of hard work. And you know, it's the very early days about like fixing bugs and changing the onboarding to reduce the number of configuration options, and fixing some Swedish version of Windows 95 that was causing a bug for a few users. Like just this relentless drive towards product quality is what mattered for them, because that's what made people get to that aha moment. Because if the file didn't sync or if it was slow, then they're not going to get there. And so for Dropbox, that mattered a lot. And this is infused into the culture to have their bias towards very high quality, which as far as like how often you send emails is a little bit absurd. Like, why the fuck is there not an email that says the folders, like the shared folders you're in, like the files that your friends have added or changed? Like that, it's like exactly like tagging you in a photo on Facebook. It's like, here's the shit that you didn't notice that happened in your Dropbox. Here's a weekly email digest. And the problem is that's really hard. Like, how do you make that not some kind of like diff, like some git diff, right? Like, it's like, make it like these files change really hard. So it's really going to be really hard to make that high quality, and so they don't do it. And so this is just this low-hanging fruit, but it's actually kind of hard engineering-wise. So it doesn't match that mentality that helped them make a really high-quality product. Is actually now getting in the way of launching scrappy, dirty things, very like quickly getting it out there. And most people bias towards the scrappy and dirty side as the problem. So I'd say for YesGraph, like I'm incredibly biased towards that. It's probably like too far. And so different companies have sort of this one-dimensional scale of like agility versus quality, and you might fall at a different point on it, and nobody gets it really right.
Yeah. So you kind of, I'll take it first.
Just talk in parallel and answer the questions.
So you kind of mentioned working with engineers, but when it comes to design, particularly people who have kind of a culture of like, this is the right way of doing things, what have you found to be the most effective kind of team dynamic working maybe with that triad, but particularly with designers?
Yeah, designers can be really opinionated without much data. And the thing is, they're often right. You know, they're often like, it is the correct answer. And so you kind of, I think the question of why is just really valuable. First off, you could always just keep asking it, and so to help explain it. And if the why comes down to like, I've seen this in 4 other applications and it's worked better in this scenario, it's actually a pretty good justification, like to explain it. And so I think it's, there's a few different answers to this question. One of them is that designers, like everyone else, really love data, and they love getting as much as possible. And there's different kinds of data, and so what we call like user research, you know, or some study is actually just really qualitative, high-quality data that you can like think a lot about. And I think not enough people focus on that aspect of design as being a really valuable measure that can influence a product team's decision. On the other side, like I think Facebook runs into this as far as like the flack that they get for their design decisions that their users don't like. And I think, who was it? Ishan Wong, now I read it. He used to be head of engineering at Facebook, and he answered a really good core question that you can find an answer on this. It's like, why does Facebook not give a fuck when their users don't like their changes? And the answer is really insightful, is that there's so much data on user behavior at Facebook that is hopeless for any designer to get an answer based upon some anecdote of their friend or their mom. And those are useful qualitatively, but they have so much data that that is the most reliable source of ground truth of what's going on there. And so that's why the anecdotes of some people complaining don't matter. I think there's other aspects of working with designers that are sort of outside of the realm of your question. For example, when you make designs, you come up with a bunch of different options about how to do something. Keep those options, because one of them might be right even if you didn't pick it. So the cycle is often like, let's make something new. It's like 10 different ways to do it. Okay, I launched it, great, fuck yeah. Hey, this is good, we should do more here, let's do an A/B test. Okay, what we should do? Let's start from scratch. Let's think about new things we should do. Just totally ignore the fact that we had 5 different options before. Like, so there's certain things in the product process that, just around how designers make things, that if only they knew, like it, or including like PMs, like if they knew that, keep that shit around, like, because then you could use it to have different variables. But overall, I think if you don't bring data, you're just going to go with my opinion. That's like a very good mentality. So bring data, because that's the only thing I'm going to listen to. And the data can be like what other companies did, like what other examples you have out there. But I think it's a fine question. I think designers, I mean, they definitely have like a really key role. But I would say another issue related to that, sort of tangential as well, is whether designers know how to code. And that matters for, I think, mainly matters for the intuition on the cost of how hard something is. And so sometimes I see a design that's like a lot of like moving objects and whatever, like really animated. And it's like, sure, it conveys the idea better, but it seems like it would be 10 times as expensive, 100 times as expensive as static text. Is that really the best way as far as cost benefit to get this out? Like maybe just a better copy would be doing it, which is also hard. So copies have one kind of design. And so I think the reason why like an engineering background is useful for different roles is mainly around the communication aspect. Like for what you're suggesting, you know like how to speak the same language, and so that's why it's useful. So I recommend. I mean, the whole everyone learn to code thing is like not about coding. It's about learning how computers work. But luckily, most designers around here have that solid foundation, so it's becoming less of an issue for a designer that doesn't understand what it costs to build something. It's like 6 answers, sorry.
There are a lot of questions, so that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So for your first point, you said set a goal, but for your last point, you kind of said never achieve it by saying don't break the goal.
No, the point was to like hit that goal the most. You probably want to make iterative changes. So don't work on something. This does not necessarily apply to everyone. So it's just specifically the Facebook growth team who had this idea. If you've worked on things that require hitting the gong, that meant you probably did not do things that could have reached the same impact much faster. So it's all about hitting the goal, and the question is how do you achieve that fastest? And so working on things that take months is probably not the answer, unless it is. So it's like, of course, there are examples of things that are really hard to do. Like a friend of mine is working on like a better version of Excel, like something that's totally online and like more like Access, but like a modern version of that, and like much better than like what Grid is making at Referrals, like different versions of Excel, like really something for analysts to really answer like a lot of hard questions. That shit's hard. Excel has a lot of history. Like just think about like interfacing with current tools. That's a lot of work. There's a lot of work required to get that right, and if you were to get it right, it'd be like game changing, you know, because it's just as game changing as like Lotus Notes. And think like some kind of data analysis tool that's as easy to use as Excel but connected to online data sources would be astounding, but nobody's built it yet. But just as an example, it's like a super, super hard problem. I don't expect you to launch that in a week. So it's really, I can't just say don't work on things that are hard. But there's probably lower hanging fruit. I can say that for almost a certainty. I've rarely talked to a company that can't point to something like, why the fuck is it that way? That's probably wrong. And that would be like a one-line change of code or something. It's almost always the case. Gustav.
So a lot of good teams mostly work in silos, so not really sharing a lot of information with other companies. And to learn a lot by working physically in Dropbox, actually people learn by growth. Like, what is the best way you learn as a working with companies?
So talking to other people is really good, and being open like this is really awesome, like coming to these kinds of events. I think it's actually, we're seeing like a sort of evolution here where people are becoming more and more and more open about these kinds of things, which is great. I also think that there's just a lot of sweat equity you can do to learn things, and so you hear about an app, what's the onboarding? Take screenshots, like print them out, put them on your wall, compare it, do that 5 times, and you can pretty much guarantee you'll get some insight about like a new onboarding flow for the latest version of iOS or something. And you just do that again and again and again. And so whatever, I don't unsubscribe from a lot of email lists for example, because I like you know, the lifecycle emails that I get from different apps, because I'm always like, well, what's the next thing they're going to throw at me to get me re-engaged for this app I tried once? You know, it's just this, it's like a learner mentality, I think is really important. I personally have a very strong, and we've talked about this, a very strong imposter syndrome when I'm up here on stage, which I think is related to having a learner mentality. It's like there's a bunch of shit I don't know, and like coming up here to say, this is how you do it, like just, it's like, it's kind of weird. But that attitude really fits well with growth, I think, because like almost personal growth too. It's like, that attitude is what gets you to know what you don't know. If you think that you know everything and you can have like, you know, I can tell you from like, from upon high, like some Da Vinci designer, like this is what you need to do, that's bullshit. So having the mentality that you have more to learn will keep you humble and will actually expose you to the information you need to learn. And get out there and talk to people, yeah.
Hi, can you please share some of the things that you tried at YesGraph? What have worked, what have not worked?
Sure. One thing that we constantly have been trying to figure out how to do is, so let me explain a bit more about the product. The way it works is that you connect to Facebook and LinkedIn and we parse all your contacts and make it easy to recommend them. And so you have this issue of like, well, the basic product is recommending your first degree connections. How do you showcase a social product that's so coupled to your first degree connections without actually connecting to Facebook and LinkedIn? So you have this threshold, like you need to get them over this activation hump of connecting to get the data, but so they're signed out, you don't know who their contacts are. You show them a list of people, they're strangers, what do you do? And so we've tried to do different things around that as far as showcasing the way the product works with like, you know, some animations or some tutorials, but I think there's a lot more we can do there on it. We have focused a lot on like the invite flows as far as adding new channels and testing how effective they are, but there's a lot more we can do there. Even just like, there's a certain hesitation at certain points in the app and we keep adding things and we keep doing more, so it does help over time. So for example, like you're trained when you see a face that if you take some action adjacent to that face, that person's gonna find out. That's just like dozens of apps are like training people to do that. If somebody got an automated email notification that somebody else referred them at a company and that was the first introduction to the recruiting process of that company, that just doesn't make any sense. So from a recruiting tool perspective, there's no way we would ever tell the candidate that this person recommended them. They'll never find out. And we say that. We say that again and again and again. And there's basically like a bottomless well of optimization just to make it clear like what action is taken to it. But also it might be triggering sort of a change in behavior that's a bit of a problem here. We've actually also done a lot of experiments at the top of the funnel. We tried different ads and seen the conversion rates. I mean, for us, we found Twitter was the most effective as far as targeting the right people. Generally, there's a huge opportunity for building an ad network to target certain individuals within companies. So if you think about the ad spend from B2B companies, it's just huge if you get it right. So being able to say, target just recruiters, target just marketers, target just sales reps, target just engineers. Like you can't do it on Facebook, you can barely do it on Twitter. And so if there's an ad platform to be built around like professional targeting based upon your role in the company, no, not your demographics, but what you do day to day. There's so many apps that like to have that. So we ran some ad campaigns there. We use Lead Genius here as well, and we ran some tests there. So Lead Genius is going to outsource SDR. So what they do is like lead research to say we're looking for initially tech companies that are 15 to 150 people, and we would prefer them to be in the Bay Area. Now research, go and find 400 companies like this. And next step is to say like, let's add some customization. Maybe they share an investor, maybe they use a competitor or something like that, so you customize the basic template that you send. And you have humans in this process. So it's not spam, it's kind of spammy, but not spam. And so you run like a bunch of tests in this. I think that's one thing that is really sort of missing from the growth community is when, it's sort of like in machine learning, all these computer scientists are discovering things that statisticians knew like 20 to 40 to 50 years ago, and they're just calling it different names, and like statistics is like, we already knew that. Like you're just like looking at it from an engineering perspective. Similarly, a lot of growth stuff, like if you talk to people on sales teams, they know all this shit. Like talk about like a coin-operated, like focused on metrics organization. The sales team in any company is that, and they just use different terms and different metrics around it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for different testing and iteration, but when I talk about it in terms of like the outbound messaging or how we do lead sourcing and qualification, it's all like really similar stuff to growth, but it's sort of using the nomenclature of sales because it's a B2B application. What else can I say about what we've done at YesGraph so far? Yeah, I mean, we, whenever possible, launch things in parallel. That's one aspect. It's more like a meta answer. It's like, it's it's really, really a lot easier to not do that. But the data that you get when you're looking at it sort of like over time, when you make a change, like what was something before and after, so many conflating variables that come into play, like whether there's a holiday or some other event or whatever that might change it. So being able to run things in parallel, even though it's often increased engineering costs, is really an important aspect. As far as wins, I mean, one of the most recent things is really app specific though, because we essentially launched with this product where you can invite people to make referrals, and then we added a paid tier where you can get a team of people to do this, based upon the size of the team. There's like a free team size. And we changed the pricing from like a per seat model, it was like $19 a seat, to having like a tier, like number of seats available. And the problem it's kind of tested is it's really hard to know, to change these pricing models, a lot of code behind it, and a lot of legacy. So pricing changes are notoriously difficult for these kinds of things. But then we recently made it so that, like it's so stupid that we did this before, low-hanging fruit. Like part of the onboarding process involved creating this team, part of this organization. And that was like, in 2 days, like a 50%, it was a 75% increase in just the total number. So like an absolute growth rate, like if you annualize that, it's some crazy huge spike. Because before it was like after the fact, after your onboarding, if you just move it very high up in the funnel, what you wanted to have happen, it basically became the default. That's very app specific though, because it's only our tacking on the paid tier that made it so that we couldn't do that earlier. One more? One last question. It'll probably be the best one of the night. No? All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.